Well, hello again. In this session we're going to be looking at the rules of conduct that dictate what an agent can and can't do. We're back at the ACT legislation website. We're going to go back into the Acts again and back into the Agents Act, and in this situation we're going to go down to the Agents Regulation. If you remember, Section 171 of the Agents Act told us that we must abide by the rules of conduct, but they didn't actually tell us what they were. So by going into the Agents Regulation, we will be able to scroll down to Schedule, in the contents, Schedule 8, and here we will find the rules of conduct. Now you will be able to access these yourself, but we will see that basically the first one is that we need to know the Act and we need to know other laws that will dictate what we can and can't do in agency practice. 8.3 tells us that we must practice fiduciary obligations. They are that we put our client's interests first above all others. 8.4, we must be honest, fair and professional at all times with all people that we deal with, and we must also show due skill, care and diligence. In other words, we've got to do our job properly and to the best of our ability. 8.6 means that we cannot operate high-pressure tactics, harass or use unconscionable conduct. Now, the term unconscionable conduct is not actually defined, but it means acting against good conscience. I like to call it the granny test, where you wouldn't want anything to happen to your granny, so because they are vulnerable, therefore you would protect their best interests. Notice that a lot of these rules literally fall in line with the Competition and Consumer Act under the Australian Consumer Law that tells us that we must abide by the same sorts of conditions. 8.7 tells us we must act in our client's best interests, and 8.8 of course is that we must keep whatever is told to us by our clients confidential. We can also only act in accordance with our client's authority. In other words, we must have a written agreement before we can take instructions. Once we have those written instructions, we must act in accordance with them as long as they are legal. Now, sometimes, of course, clients will give us instructions that may not be in their best interests. Again, that's where our fiduciary obligation will come in to explain that that may be the case. However, if they certainly instruct us to carry out those instructions, we must do them as long as they are legal. The licensee must ensure that all their employees comply with the Agents Act. So this is very important to keep for all registered salespeople and property managers, to keep their licensee aware of what is operating in the agency. We must not have conflicts of interest, so we can't operate for anyone other than our client. But remember, we must also make sure we have a duty of care to all parties that we are come into contact with. We will look at some examples of those conflict of interest in some of the text. Referral to service provider means that we must declare who we are referring any services to, and that we can't engage services of a solicitor acting for another party. This reduces the issue of conflict of interest. 8.15 talks about inducements, that we can't offer inducements for people to use our services. Again, you will be able to go and look at these in more detail once you access this piece of legislation yourself. We also can't solicit through false or misleading advertisements, and all documents must be completed in full before we ask people to accept them. So this is 8.17. 8.18 means that we can't make any representations about the Act that are not accurate and reflective of the law, and that our agency agreements, finally at 8.19, must comply with all regulations relating to the Act. So what I suggest you do now is pull up in the document this particular piece of legislation, and if you scroll right down, you will find it in detail. Be nice if the schedules come at the end of the Act. Simply find it in the numerical order, and there it is. Part 1 being the interpretation, and you will be able to go through and read these in more detail at your leisure, which I suggest you do after this session.